back to another episode of Continuum Meditations Discusses. In this episode, I have some exciting news for those of you like myself who are Exorcist TV fans. I just learned that the Exorcist TV series has been renewed for a second season on the Fox network, and I wanted to share that with those of you, my fellow Exorcist fans, who watched this very underrated and underestimated TV show Breakout last year in the late fall lineup, and pretty much take those of us who thought perhaps, well, okay, is this going to be some kind of rip-off of William Peter Blatty's novel, the man who wrote The Exorcist, himself now deceased, as many of you probably know. This very underrated and underestimated show, as it was by the critics, turned out to be a quite intriguing and very well written and very well acted and very well executed TV show overall, and it was one that caught my attention when I gave it a chance when it first came on. I didn't think it was going to be worthwhile at first. I decided to push through it for about 3 episodes, and after that, maybe after that second or third episode or so, it really started to catch my attention, and I started to watch it, and I watched it all the way through the end. And so I was very excited to see the conclusion of this particular series. I became very attached to the Rance family overall, and unexpectedly I started reviewing the TV series and putting videos up on YouTube about it for others to share in my pleasure at having discovered this series. This is something that I did not expect to do. Still, for me to take the time and the effort to want to do this for The Exorcist really told me how enthusiastic I was about this series, and that's why I wanted to share my excitement with you about it coming back for a second season. And so I'm going to go into a few of the details. There are very few at that, so it's not going to be a very long analysis or anything like that. But I'm going to go into a few of the details that have been put out there so far about this new season of The Exorcist and where we're going. Now, I've already done a video that was a kind of an overhaul, if you will, of the first season of The Exorcist, its characters, its backdrop, and what it was about. And I'll give you a link for that particular video in this video so that you can take a look at that one. But this new video that I'm going to do here is more or less a shortened version of that, very much abbreviated or truncated version of that. And what I'm going to do here is go into a few more of the details that I found about what's going to be happening in the second season of The Exorcist. So anyway, let's get to a little bit of an overview and we'll go from there. Now, as I said before, I have already done an analysis and an overview of the Exorcist TV series in a previous video. So if you want to see that versus seeing me go through all of the characters for the story again, please feel free. But there are going to be a few extra characters in this overview too, because some of the characters that were introduced to us as the series went on naturally were not in my original overview of the story. But let's get started with the primary cast members, and then we can move on to some of those auxiliary cast members later on, some of whom did not make it through the first season, disappointingly so, I might add. Some of whom, however, did not make it through the first season of the series. So I'm going to get started with the patriarch of the family, Henry Rance. Now, Henry is the father of this family who's trying to hold this fragile unit together once things begin to go wrong. Now, we don't know it when we're first introduced to him, but Henry is suffering from a brain injury that he endured as the result of a work accident, and that has transformed this normally sharp and intelligent individual who is an architect by trade into a man of a slow and dim-witted disposition who is barely conscious of what is happening around him, including to his daughters and his wife. Now, over the course of the show, Henry begins to recover, and as we come to find out, the mishap that caused his brain injury is not an accident. It is not an accident, but is the calculation of deliberate provocation that is meant to confuse him and to distract him and his wife with his condition, so that other people in the family may become the target of the supernatural designs of the demonic entity that is at war with the Rances. Now, once he begins to recover from his brain injury, Henry becomes much more cognizant of what is happening to his family, and he begins to try to, in his own way, intervene in those processes to save both his wife and his daughter Casey, who is the primary target of this demonic entity. But as we come to learn, that is really a foil, if you will, for a much more complex and intricate plot by this demonic entity to try to ensnare the real target of its attacks, which happens to be the matriarch of the family, Angela Rance. And Angela is, of course, the feminine mystique of the program, if you will, in whom is invested a number of different matters and issues, both covertly, I guess you could say, and overtly in the program. And they introduced us to her with a number of different surprises throughout the episode, throughout the series rather, that were very intriguing in my opinion. And I know it threw me for a loop, and it was a big twist on the program when they told us about this one thing I'm going to tell you about later. But let's go further, because Angela, as we come to know her, is a very dedicated wife and mother, in addition to having a thriving career in the hotel industry all her own. She is a devout Catholic, as is the entire family, of course. And as the mother of the family, she tries to guide them in the ways of upright religious discipline and doctrine to ensure that their spirits are just as cherished and nurtured and healthy as their mortal existence is by taking them to weekly mass. But there is more to Angela than meets the eye. And it is through the unfolding of the series that we come to find out that Angela Rance, wait for it, lo and behold, is actually Regan MacNeil. Yes, that Regan MacNeil from the original 1973 Exorcist movie, who was demonically possessed as the young 12-year-old girl whom we all saw in that movie as played by Linda Blair. After a number of strange events start happening with her children inside of her home, Angela/Regan begins to suspect that one of her girls is demonically possessed, just as she was a long time ago. And so Angela goes to a priest of the Catholic Church, and she seeks out his help in trying to figure out what is going on. This is one of our good men of integrity in the series, Father Tomas Ortega. Now, he is a very modern priest. He's just beginning his papal career as a man of the cloth. His outlook kind of parallels that of Father Damien Karras from the original 1973 movie, in that Father Tomas does not really believe in demonic possession. As a man of the modern times, Tomas relegates that kind of arcane thinking to the medieval church, where he regards it to belong, where he thinks it should have been left. Demons, Tomas believes, are nothing more than metaphors and projections for the internal dispositions and psychological states of people, especially those who think of themselves as being afflicted by the presence of such beings. But, and this is where we get into some interesting and very dark territory as the show progresses, Tomas gets a very rude awakening to the reality of the intersection between the natural and the supernatural when he is confronted by a possessed Casey inside the Rance family home. And this is where he begins to really start to have some serious questions about what is happening to the Rance family and whether or not he needs to open up his mind to a broader reality than things that can be just explained by the mundane processes of the natural world. But there is also another side to Tomas. He has an old girl flame, an old girl friend named Jessica, whom we also meet in the series, whom he is still exchanging occasional letters with, and whom really, if you watch it over the course of the development of the show, he is actually still in love with her, and she is still in love with him, despite her status as a married woman, okay, and his status as a dedicated and ordained priest, in which, of course, at that point he has sworn off marriage and family to be dedicated to the church. Now this leads to an inevitable affair between the two of them, both emotional and physical, and with the matrimonially dissatisfied Jessica consequently tempting Tomas again and again to succumb to both of their feelings. It's a weakness in Tomas that can ultimately be exploited by the demon that he will ultimately confront when he decides to help the Rance family. And because Tomas realizes this somewhat subconsciously, even in his own self, he does try to resist the overtures of his old girlfriend Jessica, but eventually, of course, he does succumb to them of his own cognition, of his own free will. And so while you can blame Jessica for, in that sense, I guess you could say, trying to lead him down this path which she knows that she should not have, Tomas is equally responsible in this regard, because he knows better in and of his own right, and he chose to indulge this in despite the fact. But Tomas also decides to go against church orders by going ahead and aiding the Rance family without the permission of his superiors in the church. Despite all of this, though, Tomas is a man of deep feeling and abiding love for those whom he cares about. And he is a man striving in his heart to be the kind of quality priest that he believed God wants him to be. He is an individual who, because of that makes him altogether a very decent human being who is worthy of his position, even considering his failing. There becomes an obstacle for Tomas that his burgeoning mentor, Father Marcus Keene, will have to deal with him with regard to, and also it becomes a matter for the church to deal with at some point. But this leads us to another part of our analysis, and that is the firstborn daughter, Catherine Rance, also known as Cat. Now, Cat, or Catherine Rance, is one of the children of the Rance family, and she is known as the graceful one. She is, I guess you could say, the one who is considered to be the talented one between the two daughters of the Rance family. She is a ballet dancer, but she's also prone toward mild narcissism and self-absorption, especially after the tragic accidental death of her girlfriend and fellow dancer, another young woman who we know only as Julia in the series. And yes, it is shown that Catherine does have some kind of predilection toward lesbianism, whether it was just an experiment or whether it's actually how she is. I don't think that is actually made clear in the series. It is just shown in the series that she did have this attraction toward another young female in the show, who is subsequently killed, and as we come to find out, that death was a design of the demonic entity that was attacking the Rance family. So, upon Julia's death, Catherine goes into a very deep and morose depression, from whence she withdraws from the family as a whole. She isolates herself in her room. She becomes very antagonistic toward everyone, particularly toward her parents, Henry and Angela. She especially, as I said, resents her mother for not accepting her sexual orientation and being unwilling to even speak the name of her girlfriend in her presence. And she is even angry at her father at this point for being effectively a potato head, if you will, quote unquote, who is unable to care for himself or to be completely present in the family's affairs. Now, this, however, will change as it becomes more apparent that her sister's problems are actually greater than Kat's own. And this is where we get into the main, I think anyway, the main focus of the story, the main character of the story, Casey Rance. Casey is the baby sister of the family. She is the younger. She is also very unlike Catherine. She is not graceful. She is not necessarily that talented. She is not necessarily as attractive as Kat. Perhaps this is more of a perception than a reality, but she does not hold the same esteem in her parents' eyes as her sister Catherine. Okay, Casey is a tomboy between the two girls. She might be considered something of a wallflower between the two girls, where Catherine is very elegant and beautiful and graceful. Casey is very rugged, cute, by some estimations at least, but far from the glamour girl, and she's also somewhat of a rough and tumble girl at the same time. And because she is treated so differently from her sister, and perhaps somewhat less than her sister by others, possibly, as I said, including her own parents, Casey is resentful of Catherine, and she is always searching for a way to distinguish herself from her superstar sister and be noticed of her own merit. Now, her emotional discontent leads Casey on a journey toward demonic possession, and this is where we start to get into the meat and potatoes of the series, when we begin to find out that Casey has been flirting around with an individual whom nobody can see but her, known as the salesman, who in fact turns out to be this extra-dimensional demonic entity. And though it is Mother Angela Rance's original contention that it is her daughter Catherine who is demonically possessed, as I said before, we come to learn, as does Angela, that it is in fact Casey who has been taken over by the seducing power of this evil spirit. The demon's segue into Casey's life is the promise of self-actualization, separate and distinct from her sister's long shadow, you see, and acceptance for her own innate beauty and talents, which it tries to exploit by using these lies and other psychological manipulations against her to get her, Casey, to accept its presence in her life. And the demon leads Casey down a primrose path, if you will, until it has burrowed deep enough into her psyche to take full control not only over her mind, but ultimately what it wants is full control over her body as well. So let's talk about the salesman / the demon, whom we also come to know as Pazuzu, and those of you who've seen the original Exorcist will recognize that name. Let's get into him now. So, calling himself the salesman, this otherworldly entity that we come to see in the series is on a singular mission when we first meet him, and that mission is to seduce Casey into his web and capture her soul for his own. Now, he grants her preternatural powers. Preternatural powers meaning powers that are not necessarily supernatural, but are somewhat beyond the realm of ordinary human ability. Such as these are things that she's incapable of summoning by herself. Super strength, knowledge about other people she cannot possibly know or have, the ability to hurt other people without actually physically touching them or coming into physical contact with them. And we actually see her, Casey, break the leg of one of her rivals on this team without even touching her while they're on the field playing, and it is attributed to nothing more than being an accident that just happened. But we all know, as we're watching the story, that it is Casey, with the help of the demon, will get revenge on this girl who is making fun of her and pushing her around and other things of this nature. So these are all classic signs of demonic infestation in a living human being's body or in a living human being's life. And the salesman uses these gifts, quote unquote, as vehicles to try to get Casey to trust him more and let him in even more so. Just open the door just a little bit more, just a little bit more. Crack it open just a little bit more each time, and each time he's gaining more and more and more control over her. Okay? But, as we come to learn, there is more to the salesman than meets the eye, even for a demon. Because we come to learn that this fallen angel, whoa, wait for it, is the very same evil spirit that once possessed Casey's mother, Reagan McNeil, as a child. Yeah. Whoa. Okay, so later in the series, the salesman reveals himself as Captain Howdy. And then again, those of you who've seen the original show, the original movie from '73, you know who Captain Howdy was. Captain Howdy was the entity that used itself as this little red bird, right? That used that image as a way to gain access to the young Regan McNeil's mind and to gain access into her life. A lonely, isolated child who didn't get along with her parents, most specifically her father. Even though she had a doting mother who loved her very much, that mother was also somewhat absent and self-absorbed in her own career as an actress. And because of this, young Regan McNeil felt very isolated and lonely and alone, and she starts playing around with a Ouija board in the basement of her mother's house. And this is how the demon first takes control of her. Okay? This is what it uses as a vehicle to ride into this lonely little girl's life and start taking possession of her. And it calls itself Captain Howdy. Well, this is the exact same name he uses when he contacts Regan/Angela Rance again in the basement of her house in the Exorcist TV series. Okay? And we come to learn through a group of revelations earlier in the story, as Angela begins to figure out what is going on in her home, that she is Regan McNeil. Yes, the same little girl from the movie. Okay? The Exorcist TV series, therefore, is shown not simply to be merely some spin-off of the 1970s movie, but it's actually a continuation, after a fashion, of those events. And it is demonstrated that the salesman/Captain Howdy is in fact Pazuzu. I know that name's kind of funny to some of you. It is funny to me too. But that is the exact same demon that was confronted by Fathers Lancaster Marin and Damian Karras in the film. Okay? It's also shown in the television story that this quite clever demon is singularly responsible for all of the travails that have been happening to the Rance family over the life of the program. Henry's brain injury, Kat's car accident that kills her girlfriend, Casey's emotional problems. All of these things are in an effort to try to get at its real target, which is not Casey Rance at all. Casey Rance is a foil, but she's not the target. The target is Angela/Regan. And it wants to get revenge on Angela for beating it 40 years ago and having it be exorcised from her body, when it firmly believes, as the salesman/Pazuzu says in the series, that you are mine, you belong to me, and there is no way, legalistically speaking, I guess, that you should have been able to exorcise or expel me from your body. You were my property, and I want you back. And whatever I have to do to get you, I'm going to do it. Whatever 10 kinds of hell I need to bring into your life to make you submit, I will bring it. Now, this is effectively what he says to Angela as the series goes along. And so we find out that the very same demon that is after Casey, and that is trying to destroy the family as a whole, its real target is Angela. What a revelation in the series! And this is what ties the whole new series, this whole new conceptualization, into the whole original premise that was done by William Peter Blatty's novel and this subsequent movie that was made back in 1973. That was an awesome revelation in the storyline, one that threw me for a loop and really blew me away, and really set this series on a course, I believe, for greatness in and of its own right, even with all the other excellent writing and character development that had been done of its own right to this point in the storyline. But this also leads us into some other areas of interest as the storyline goes on. Now, as the show continues, we are eventually treated to the presence of Angela's mom, Angela/Regan. We are treated to the presence of her mom, the former actress Chris McNeil herself, who shows up on the scene when she discovers that her granddaughter Casey has gone missing, thanks to the news reports that she's watching, which show that her granddaughter is not has gone missing, and which ultimately began to show Chris McNeil, and this is a very interesting tie-in in and of itself, which I should point out. Chris McNeil, as I said, this is the same Chris McNeil, just an older version of her, a much older version of her, that you saw in the original 1973 movie. And because she has been keeping up with her family all of these years, she knew exactly where Angela was, she knew about her children, she knew about her husband. She just never bothered to interfere in Angela's life because she knew how much her daughter I won't say hated her, but resented her for all of the things that she had done in Angela's mind as a little girl anyway, to exploit her condition all those years ago when she was a young 12-year-old, pre-adolescent kid. All those years ago, when her mother tried to exploit for money and for their, if you will, for their survival, which it comes to be revealed that was really the ultimate reason, while she went on all these talk shows, while she wrote a book about her daughter's condition and all this other kind of stuff. This is revealed in the series. Watch it. You'll enjoy this. This is why Angela resents her mother so much. She doesn't necessarily hate her mom, but she does resent all the things that her mom did to her to exploit and take advantage of this condition, this situation, and she tried to get as far away from Chris MacNeil as possible because of this. And because Mother MacNeil, as the demon calls her in the story, knew all of this about her daughter, she decided to stay away. Just keep at arm's length. Don't talk to your daughter. Don't try to contact your daughter. None of that, because she doesn't want to talk to you. She doesn't want to see your face again, as far as Chris MacNeil was concerned, right? But when she finds out that Casey is missing, Mother MacNeil, Grandmother MacNeil, goes to Casey's house. She appeals to Henry Rance, at the first person who she meets when she goes to the house, and she says, "I'm Chris MacNeil, and I've come to see my daughter." All right, well, who the heck is your daughter? And we come to find out, of course, that's when we come to find out later on, I think in that same show, that Angela Rance is Regan MacNeil. Okay? So, her reappearance causes a lot of strong disagreements to happen between herself and Angela about how to find Casey. And it nearly scuttles all of these efforts when Angela asks Chris to go ahead and leave, when Chris, that is, erroneously invites a reporter into Angela's home to interview Angela about Casey. Chris's intentions are honorable. She is trying to keep her granddaughter's name and face in the paper so that people don't forget about her. But Angela just sees this as another opportunity to be exploited. Okay, for this whole situation to be exploited by Chris MacNeil, because she believes, okay, you know what happened with me all those 40 years ago. And now I know that my daughter is undergoing the same problem that I underwent 40 years ago as a little girl. I am not going to allow you, Chris MacNeil, to exploit my kid the way you exploited me. That's not Mother MacNeil's intention, but that's what Angela thinks is her intention. And so these two go on the warpath with one another until it's finally resolved later on in the series. Okay? And that's in part because of Henry's insistence that Chris can help them find Casey. And Grandmother MacNeil and Mother Angela begin a slow climb toward a mutual trust toward one another that is promising, but unfortunately will be cut short by a tragic event when Angela murders Chris under the influence of demonic possession. Yes, Angela is repossessed by the demon Pazuzu in an effort to try to save her daughter Casey from being killed by the demon, who threatens to murder Casey if Angela does not submit to its will and be repossessed by it as a trade-off, an exchange, if you will, for Casey's life in exchange for Angela's submission and compliance. Now, I probably should go ahead and tell you about one of the other two fathers actually in the series, because in my excitement in talking about all of these things that were going on in the Rance family and Tomas as he's introduced, I did neglect to mention Tomas does have a mentor, just like Father Damien Karras in the original series turns to Father Lancaster Marin. Tomas himself turns to an exorcist, a true exorcist, unlike Tomas, who is not an exorcist at all, but he turns to someone who has a great deal of experience in the supernatural. That is Father Marcus Keene, and this is the exorcist of the show who mimics the experience and knowledge of Lancaster Marin in the original movie. But Marcus is more than just that. In my estimation anyway, Marcus is a man of power and awesomeness in his own right. And I think she gave me my nickname. I call Marcus the Punisher, because he's proven himself willing to go toe-to-toe with the forces of darkness, be they natural or supernatural. And this guy is actually willing to kill people. kill people possessed by demons. Okay, so, and he knows how to win when he does. Okay, Marcus's background has made him ideally suited to be a Catholic priest, a Catholic exorcist, because early in his life he was confronted with the truth of human ugliness when he witnessed his own father murder his mother at the tender age of 7 years old. Okay, now in retaliation for this, he killed his father in self-defense, but of course he was orphaned as a result. The church takes Marcus in as a ward, and later on they secretly train him to become an exorcist when he showed the capacity to do so by confronting a demonically possessed man at only 12 years of age. Okay, so and he wasn't afraid. In fact, I think Marcus says in the story that when he first realized demons were real and that they could possess people, he says he was relieved at the reality of it, not frightened by it. So for the last 40 years since, Marcus has plied his trade from place to place, helping those people who need to be freed from the horrific devastation of demonic control, right? But there's more to Marcus. It's revealed in the show that Marcus is also known to the fallen angelic brotherhood as a priest to be regarded and perhaps even feared. One of the demons who confronts Marcus early on in the TV series says, the great Marcus, I think they call him, the one we feared, or the only one we feared, which is a very telling, I think, interesting insight into Marcus's character, into his understanding, and perhaps a bit of his boldness as well in being able to confront this level of reality that most people don't even want to even acknowledge exists in that sense. But he confronts it head on, and he's confronted it head on to such a degree that the demons fear Marcus to some point. And it's not, as he reveals, because of him necessarily, but because he is strong in his faith and strong in the God that he believes he serves, right? So we come to find out that the demons in fact want Marcus to join them on the dark side, and that they have in the past tried to tempt him to do so, okay, and join their celestial combat, if you will, against God's hierarchy and against his creation and against his order. So Marcus has resisted this siren song of treason against the Heavenly Father's celestial authority so far, and he does so throughout the first season of the series. I guess we'll find out whether or not he's going to continue to do that as the second season goes on. Now, the last of the priests that I want to talk about is Father Devin Bennett. Father Devin Bennett, or Father Bennett, as he's called in the series, is also a very intriguing character. He is the prefect of papal outreach and security. He is, in fact, a politician, a church politician, if you will. He's a man of refinement and education. We can see that he's quite adept in different languages. He's very skilled in diplomacy, in negotiation, and also very surprising but very heartening to me to see is that he is a skilled fighter, able to handle himself against Satan's mortal minions when it comes to physical combat. Father Bennett actually manages to kill more than a few demons in the series, and show himself to be a very worthy ally to both Fathers Tomas and Marcus in this order of battle against the demonic horde, right? But Devin is a hard-fighting soldier who's faced the possessed before, and he's beaten them. He is the first, besides Father Marcus, to realize that there is a wider conspiracy going on than any one individual family. A wider demonic or satanic conspiracy against the church as a whole is underway. And we come to find out that part of that conspiracy, at least, is a conspiracy to assassinate the reigning pope of the series and to destroy the faith of millions of Catholics, Christians in the process, right? Devin goes undercover of his own recognizance to find out who the would-be perpetrators behind this plot are and bring them to justice. Now, in the process, Father Bennett is captured by the enemy and he is tortured, but he is not killed, and I was very glad to see that, by the way. And he's given the choice: become one of the integrated, as they call them in the series, that is, one of the demonically possessed, or die. Okay? serve the Satanic Brotherhood, or go to your mortal end. However, as expected, Father Bennett does not succumb to this choice. He does not give in. He survives the fight, and he survives to see another day. And this helps him, helps his fellow priests Marcus and Tomas as well. So I really like Father Bennett. He is going to be returning for the second season. He's a scholar warrior, and I think he is a superb addition to this group of staunch truth seekers, if you will, who are fighting the good fight on behalf of the Heavenly Father, if you will. Okay, so that is an overview of the characters, and I probably took a little longer than I wanted to give you an overview of that, but it is more of an overview than you'll get by looking at the first video I did on this, because a lot of the things that came to light as the series went on, I was not able to talk about in the first video because they hadn't happened yet, obviously. So now you have a little bit more background on some of the things that were going on as the story progressed. So for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to go into a lot about the subplot of the first season of the Exorcist TV series. Instead, what I'm going to do is point you to my other videos, which I did as a comparative analysis of the subplots of the show, and of the show as a whole, really. But there you can take a look for yourself at the auxiliary characters, people like Maria Walters, Lester and Cherry Rigo, Mother Bernadette, and others who were integral to the subplot of the storyline of The Exorcist in its first year. I did analyze a lot of these things, particularly in the videos that I did with a lot more detail than I will do here, simply because of the sake of time. So from here, let's discuss the new season of The Exorcist that's going to be coming out and where that's going to be going. Maybe a few things that are going to happen here. We don't have a lot of information about this, to be honest with you, so there's not a lot I'm going to be able to break down about this and analyze, but I will talk about my interest in seeing what's going on, some of the excitement that I do have for looking at what's going to be happening with this series, and hopefully where it's going to lead us now. Okay, so as some of you may already know by now, the actor John Cho will be joining the second season of The Exorcist as a new character for this particular upcoming season. Now, for those of you who are familiar with John Cho, he really does not need a lot of introduction by me. For those of you who may not be as familiar with him, this particular actor, most famously, I guess by now can be said, is the actor who has played the reincarnated version of Mr. Sulu from the J.J. Abrams iteration of Star Trek that has been going since 2009. That has progressed from 2009 Star Trek to Star Trek Into Darkness, and now has come out with this recent version of that called Star Trek Beyond. And John Cho is the new version of Mr. Sulu from that set of movies. So he is going to be joining the horror series next season as an individual by the name of Andrew Kim. He is, according to what I'm seeing on the TV guide online, he is a former child psychologist who runs a group home for 5 at-risk foster children on a secluded private island off the coast of Seattle. According to other sources that I'm seeing on the internet at this point, however, what we are going to see is Father Marcus, Father Tomas, and Father Bennett will be the recurring characters of the series, and they will go to the foster home where Andrew Kim's kids are, and they will find out through a series of investigations that is one of the kids that is being targeted by a powerful / demonic force, and it is this kid, we don't know if it's male or female at this point, who will be the new focus of the story. Now, according to these sources, Gina Davis, who played Angela Rance, Alan Ruck, who played her husband Henry, Hannah Kosoka, who played Casey, and Brianne Howie, who played her sister Catherine, will not be in this upcoming season. At least not in the sense that they were in the first season. And they may appear, according to what some of these people are saying, here and there. They may have some cameos or perhaps other things, but they will not be the focus, the central focus of this series. And for me, that kind of makes sense. As much as I love the Rance family, and particularly how much I loved Casey, who I believe was very well acted by Hannah Kosoka, their story was effectively resolved in the first season. And what are you going to do? Are you going to have them being repossessed, or one of them being repossessed, or perhaps being oppressed by another demon, or perhaps the same demon at some point? It kind of becomes redundant at that point. And again, I'm like a lot of you who love that family, who watch the show, but I fully can understand why they would decide to take this course of action and move the show's focus away from the Rance family and onto another person or group of persons who may be under the influence of demonic possession or oppression in the series. Jeremy Slater, who is the executive producer of The Exorcist, explained that, the first season was about the Rance family. It was about telling their story. Now that mystery has been resolved, now what he wants to do for season 2 is to come up with an equally riveting new storyline, but that has the same intensity and the same gripping focus to it that the first season did. So, Fathers Tomas, Marcus, and Bennett will be part of season 2, and if they get out of the second season, upcoming seasons also possibly. Those three characters, Jeremy Slater, he wants those three characters to be the central focus of the storyline, and he wants the audience to emotionally connect with those three characters as the triumvirate, if you will, of the series. And for me, that's not really that hard to do. I like all three of the fathers. I especially like Father Marcus, okay? Because he is such an awesome guy, his exposition, if you will, the exposition of his character is very cool. The genesis of his character, if you will, in other words, is very cool. How he became what he is, all of that is shown in season 1, and I think he is very easy, in my opinion anyway, to relate to on that level. I also really do like, and I would like to see more about, Father Bennett. As I said, Bennett is a warrior. He is a scholar. In every sense of the word, in my opinion, you could characterize him as a warrior priest, someone who I think whose talents and abilities, both as an exorcist and as a fighter and as a scholar, all of those different talents that he possesses can surely be put to use to a greater degree in the storyline. Tomas is the person who I think is really going to do the most growing, however. And in that sense, I think you're going to see that he is going to be the person who is going to learn the most, and perhaps for most people is going to be the individual who they can emotionally connect to the most, where the others, in my opinion, probably, especially for Bennett, he's more of an intellectual guy, and most people may not connect with him so much because of that. And Marcus is more of a, don't want to call him closed off, but he's more, he's more of a hardened guy, and so most people may not be able to penetrate that almost impenetrable exterior shell that he has in order to be able to connect with him. I was able to connect with these guys though, and in particular out of those three, Marcus and Bennett the most. So I'm really looking forward. But I like Tomas too. As I said, he's a stand-up guy. He knows where his faults are, but he's willing to look past, not look past them, look past those faults in terms of not pretending that they don't exist or ignoring them and saying, I have no faults. But he's willing to say, I do have faults, but by the grace of God go I. Effectively, that's what he's trying to say. He's willing to acknowledge, I am a sinner, but because I rely on the grace of God Almighty, I can overcome those faults, not by my might or will alone, but by the grace of God. So anyway, these are the things that are happening so far that I know about in the storyline for the upcoming season. And as I said, we don't know a whole lot at this point about what's happening, but it will be interesting to see John Cho join the series as a series regular. It will be very interesting to see the growth curves of Fathers Tomas, Marcus, and Bennett as we go on in the series. I personally am looking forward to seeing the second season, and I really hope that this season is going to be even greater, not just as good, but even greater than the first one. So, hey, second season of The Exorcist, come on with it. And we'll see what happens after that. I will probably do some reviews as time goes on for the season, and hopefully I can be as interesting and insightful with them as I was for, at least according to some of you anyway, as I was for the first season. So until next time, Exorcist fans, be blessed.